Okay, welcome to this Support Tools mini webinar. My name is Rowan Yeoman. I'm with the Ākina Foundation based in Auckland, New Zealand. And with this short webinar, we're going to talk about prioritization. And this is specifically designed for people that are working to support social enterprises, so intermediaries and consultants and anyone out there that's trying to help social enterprises become more successful. This is a tool to help you help them with their prioritization, which is a pretty critical thing in terms of getting started as a social enterprise. If you don't have prioritization right, you tend to do the wrong things and you waste your resources, your money, time, and effort and love on things that aren't bringing you closer to success. And so it's pretty important to have a good conversation and good thinking around prioritization. That's what we're going to work on here. And we're going to be identifying what is crucial for success and what isn't. And that sounds really simple, but sometimes it's really difficult. So we're going to show you a simple tool to try and understand how to reconcile those things. So you want to use this tool in the early stages of a social enterprise to get clear direction and strategy. So it's really a tool to help a social enterprise get to a proper strategy for what they're doing, one that makes sense and is likely to deliver results. And this is the tool. It's very simple. We haven't really given it a name. We call it the 3 circles. Feel free to let us know if you've got a better name than that. But fundamentally, it's a tool for figuring out where to put your ideas. So on the left, we've got MVP, which is minimum viable product. In the middle, we've got success, which is what is your social enterprise business model going to look like when it's succeeding? What's the model that's going to get you to success, where you can pat yourself on the back and say, hey, we've achieved what we wanted to achieve here. We've made it happen. And then on the right-hand side, the blue circle is fantasy. And that is for all those things that we would love to do one day, but that aren't necessarily critical for us succeeding. And what we find working with social enterprises is that most of them in the early stages find it really hard to tease out what is crucial to the business model succeeding and delivering us the impact that we want, and what is a nice to have idea that we would one day like to implement, but is not critical to us delivering that core impact that we want to deliver. And this model is a way of teasing those things out. So fundamentally, what you want to be doing is helping them understand what that success model looks like, what the simplest articulation of a business model that will deliver them the success that they want, the impact success and the financial sustainability that they want. And that gives you an opportunity to then relegate some of those ideas into the fantasy bucket. And what that allows you to do is kind of, in a respectful and acceptable way, take ideas that may be cluttering up the thinking and place them in the fantasy bucket. And that allows you to say, hey, this sounds like a great idea. It's not critical to making this venture succeed in the short term. And therefore, we're going to put it in the fantasy bucket. So it's still there. You can still do it one day, but we're not going to let it block our thinking right now. And quite often that happens because we may have multiple founders and they all have different passions or different versions of what they think the social enterprise should be. And they're all trying to push those things in. And sometimes it's really hard to get a clear articulation of what it should be because someone's in there trying to push their particular passion. And so it allows you to reconcile what is crucial with what is something that we'll get to later on, and it allows that person for whom their passion is something that you're going to get to later on to still understand that they're not being rejected, that is something that you can get to one day, but it's not something that you have to be thinking about now. And then critically, the MVP circle is the minimum viable product. So it's the thing or things you're going to build now in order to prove that success is possible. And that's going to be the process for validating the social enterprise. So this is using the lean startup methodology. We define what success looks like, and then minimum viable product is the thing or things we're going to build to prove that success is possible, so we can then go and start building the thing that we need to build to make success possible. And that's a sort of measured way of iterating and testing our assumptions in that success model and proving that they work before we actually have to build the whole thing that's going to succeed. Hopefully that makes sense, but if not, let's walk through an example that we should all understand. So if we take Facebook as our example, obviously not a social enterprise, but pretty useful for understanding how this model can work. So if you think about Facebook, right now they look like the fantasy. You know, they're all of these things. They're a social network, they're an identity platform, they're a gaming platform, they're all of these kinds of things. But when Facebook started out, they weren't intending to do all of those things. Their success model when they started out, and when the first investment went into Facebook by a man called Peter Thiel, their goal, and if you look on the internet, you can find their original pitch decks. Their goal was to be the largest social network on global campuses. And that was a big, ambitious goal. That would make them a giant, big company with lots and lots of money. It would make everybody very successful. And so that was the thing that they were going after. And a bunch of all the other things that they ended up achieving at the start would have been put in the fantasy bucket. And the reason they would have been put in the fantasy bucket, things like the identity platform and the gaming platform and all of those things, is that it would be impossible to build an MVP that tested all of those things. It would just be too hard to try and test all those different value propositions at the start. And so what they did is they said, no, success for us is students and universities. If we can achieve market dominance with students at global universities, we will be successful. And so any of those of you who've seen The Social Network, the movie about Facebook, you'll know they built an MVP, a first version of the product in Harvard, and it was for Harvard dorm students to make friends, meet people, organize events, and things like that. Through doing that small MVP, they were able to prove that students will use the product for a certain number of hours a week and would share the product, which is crucial to Facebook's customer adoption channels, that they would share it with friends. And so from having some customers, you were able to gain more customers. So that MVP allowed them to prove that success was possible, which allowed them to get investment and build the product. And then once that success started to happen, then they could start thinking about, oh, maybe there's different customer segments. Maybe we could think beyond students. Maybe, we could say university professors might be Facebook users, or maybe, ex-cons, or stay-home parents, or any one of the huge number of customer segments that Facebook now has. They would all have been in the fantasy bucket to start with. They would all have been in the, well, when we're the largest social network on global campuses, then we'll be able to try out all of these other customer segments. And so that allowed them to keep their MVP very clean, very simple, and very targeted to learn a very simple thing. Will students use our product and share it with their friends? Once they proved that, then they could get funding and they could build success. And then out of that, they could then start grabbing some of those things in the fantasy bucket and testing them out. Hopefully that makes sense. Why is it useful to do that? Well, without a clear understanding of what success looks like, we can't create a sensible strategy. So if Facebook had all of those different customer segments and all of those different value propositions around identity and gaming and all of that kind of stuff, they wouldn't be able to create a sensible strategy. They wouldn't be able to figure out what needed to be tested first, in what order things needed to go in. So it was fundamental to that. The second thing is it removes misunderstandings and disagreement from the equation really early on. And that's critical to being able to succeed, because if you're going ahead with the notion, with team members who have different expectations of how this thing's going to work, um, then you've got incoherence from the start. And later on down the line, that's going to become, an ugly confrontation or hurt feelings or people working at cross purposes and moving in different directions, but otherwise a complex and expensive problem to solve. So removing those misunderstandings, getting really clear about what we're saying success looks like right at the start is really, really valuable. Um, and finally, it's about setting a venture up to iterate from that MVP bucket to success and not getting sidetracked along the way. And lean startup as a methodology is the fastest and cheapest way to make that progress. So defining success, defining MVP, and the journey from MVP to success is the fastest and cheapest way to be successful with a social enterprise, or for that matter, a regular startup. Now, if you want to learn more on the support tools front, so tools to help you work with other social enterprises, there's some resources here around understanding the types of social enterprises, the stages of social enterprise, customer segmentation, and there's a bunch of webinars on how to use the social lean canvas, how to start a social enterprise, how to understand impact and impact measurement. And then there's the Social Lean Canvas website, which is a great resource for figuring out how to map a business model. Um, and we definitely recommend that once you've figured out what success looks like, the next step would be map that inside a Social Lean Canvas so that you can figure out where you need to start, who your customers are, all those sorts of things. I hope this has been useful. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.